Welcome to the AFC South Sports Betting Picks video here at FTNBets.com, otherwise known as Betting with Benny. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and today we're going to talk about the AFC South. But before we get into that, let me bring in my co-host, my man, my brother from another mother, Deqwan Young. What is up, Quan? What's going on? You ready to talk a little bit of AFC South football here?
I am ready to talk about the AFC South. This is actually, I think, probably 90s football at its best. You got two running backs that we're going to talk about. This is all you need to know. This powerhouse grinded out football.
Yeah, and this is a real interesting division, right? Because it's the haves and the have-nots. That's basically the easiest way to explain it. There's two teams at the top that have a chance to win. There's two teams at the bottom that have not won a lot of games at all in the last couple of years. And this year doesn't really look like it's going to be any different. So last year, the Titans were actually 12-5, the number one overall seed in the AFC on some tiebreakers and things, went all the way down to the last week of the season. The Indianapolis Colts were one of those 9-8 teams that were right on the border of making the playoffs, also went down to the last week of the season there. And then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans, who were two of the worst teams in football last year, two of the bottom five, two of the teams that got those big draft picks up there at the front because, well, they were just really, really that bad last year. So, you know, like I said, I mean, again, I think at least Jacksonville should be improved this year. Houston, I don't know. That's left to be seen there. But, you know, again, I don't think anything's going to be different this year, Quan. Do you? I mean, I think we have two teams at the top, Indianapolis and Tennessee, pretty evenly matched. We can make arguments one way or another for both. And then two teams at the bottom, Jacksonville and Houston, who we can make arguments on who's worse, right?
I think the major improvement is Jacksonville. They got rid of what's
Urban Meyer, yeah.
Urban Meyer, yeah. Listen, I remember him from Ohio State, but that NFL tenure left something to be desired. But I think you're right. It's two at the top, two at the bottom, and I think Vegas has it right with what we're going to talk about in the next segment with who's the team to beat in this division. It's a major improvement, and I think a little bit of regression coming from the top two teams, and you're going to figure out who when we get to the next segment.
Yeah, and you know, last year I think that was the way that most people expected it to be as well. You had one team that kind of outperformed a little bit and one team that, you know, probably underperformed a little what they are. And the easiest way to look at that is just look at the point differential for these two teams. You know, the Titans won the division last year, but they had the lowest point differential of any division winner in all of football last year at just 65 points. So they had 7 more wins than they had losses at 12-5. And in those 7 wins, their point differential was only 65 points between all the games that they won there. You know, you look at Indianapolis, who was in second, they had a point differential closer to 90, which is around what some of the other division winners had right there. So, you know, really you could say that Indianapolis was a little bit unlucky last year and the Titans were a little bit lucky to get the number 1 seed. And then maybe that's one of the reasons why when we talk about it later today, you may see a little bit of a switch between those two teams. And that in the business, they call a tease there, Quan. So we're going to tease that a little bit there for the next segment of the show. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on Betting with Benny and be right back to talk some more AFC South sports betting picks for 2022. Welcome back to the AFC South sports betting pick video here at FTN Bets on Betting with Benny. Quan, you got a graphic for us that we can throw up here so we can talk a little bit of AFC South football?
I do. Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to do this a little differently today because I want to get the teams at the bottom out of the way first because I have a feeling that we're going to do a lot more talking about the teams at the top. So the teams at the bottom, we'll start with the Houston Texans here. The Texans, Jeff Ratcliffe has them projected for 5.2 wins, which you may not think is a lot, but the sports books right now have them projected for even less. The number that's out there in the market, win total on the Houston Texans, is only 4.5 wins this year. And you could actually get it at plus money to the over. PointsBet has this at plus 105. DraftKings has it at even money, plus 100. A couple of the other books have it coming in at minus 105 in there. So really, based on this number that Jeff has, one of the better bets that we have here, one of the bigger differentials between what the books are offering and what we have, is actually the Houston Texans to go over 4.5 wins. And we're getting paid plus money on it, Quan, at plus 105 on PointsBet. Can you do it? Can you pull the trigger on the Houston Texans to get 5 wins?
I say yes, man. I like the over here for 2 reasons. Last year, Houston was going into the season with Deshaun Watson's status up in the air. He didn't want to play, and we all knew that coming into the season. Reason number 2, Lovie Smith at coach. Last year, I think there was a bit of a rejection with who they hired as head coach. But this year, I think a Lovie Smith coach team can fight. They're going to compete. I think they're going to be aggressive on defense. And I don't hate Davis Mills, man. I think that there were some times he was shining last season. And I think a year or 2 under his belt, there are going to be some things that maybe go different. They played New England tough, and that was one of the biggest tests they had in the season last year. So I like an over here, and it's at plus money too. So you throw some pizza money on it and ride it out. That's all you can do.
Yeah, so all you Texans fans out there, I mean, we're riding along with you because I put this bet in as well. Listen, again, the numbers that are out there, I mean, it's only 5 wins, right? And we say only 5 wins. They're going to be like 0-11 going into week 12 this year, and then we're going to be like, yeah, it's only 5 wins. But no, when it really comes down to it, like I said, we're projecting them for over 5 wins here anyway. That 4.5 number just felt a little bit low for me. I was expecting to see it at 5.5 and be like, yeah, we can't play that number. Can't play it to the downside, can't play it to the over either. But since we're already projecting them to go over this number and it's at plus money, you got an edge there. And that's really what sports betting is all about, is betting your edges. If you think a number is going to go over and you're getting paid plus money on it, you take that bet every time. Because again, maybe it doesn't work out this time, but if you make that bet 100 times out of 100, at the end of the day, you're going to wind up being profitable. So this is one that I got to put a little bit of money on. I got to back our numbers. I got to back our guy, Jeff Ratcliffe, who's never steered me wrong. So I'm going to take the over on the Texans wins right here. So let's throw up the next one here, talk a little bit about the Jacksonville Jaguars and what we got for them in the 2021 season. So Jacksonville is projected for 5.8 wins, and this is actually one of the better underplays that we could look at here, because Jacksonville's number out there in the market, the consensus number for them out there in the market is 6.5. Now it is paying plus 115 to the over, plus 120 to the over. FanDuel has it at plus 115. I think there's a couple spots you can get it at like plus 110 or so. But even with that being said, that's a big ask for this team. This is a team that had 3 wins last year. So now you're asking them to win twice as many games in 2022 in order to pay this off here. So, Quan, that's going to be my question for you here. You think Jacksonville can win twice as many games this year as they did last year?
I don't think this town ain't big enough for the two of us. If I'm looking at the Texans in the over, I kind of want to lean to the under on the Jags. We're getting a new coach. And I know there are going to be growing pains this year because they were basically a rudderless ship last season. So it's kind of hard for me to put faith in both of these bottom 2 teams. I think I would trust Lovey a little more than I would trust Doug Peterson. And I don't know why I say that, because, Doug Peterson, Super Bowl winning coach, but it just seems like Trevor Lawrence probably has a bigger hill to climb, with the team that they have. And listen, I think they kind of broke the market with who did they pay? DJ Chark, was it?
Yeah, no, they paid Christian Kirk. They let
Christian
DJ
Kirk. That's
walk.
What it was. Yeah, DJ Chark walk, Christian Kirk walk. So I mean, I don't see him as a big number 1 guy. He still got Marvin Jones down there, but it's nothing that gets me excited. So and they looked horrible. Like, I know people aren't watching preseason, but they looked pretty horrible.
They did look bad. Yeah, they did look bad in that game. My big thing with the Jacksonville Jaguars is there's still a lot of questions, right? It's a young team. So if you're a Jaguars fan, I don't think you should feel discouraged about that. You got a second-year quarterback. The guy definitely didn't take any steps forward with the coaching that they had last year. So you almost want to bring it all back down and start over from zero with him again, which is fine. He's still plenty young, super talented, was one of the top prospects to come out of college football in a long time right now. So, I mean, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be fine. But there's just a lot of questions. Like Travis Etienne. Is he going to bounce back? Is he going to be the guy, the explosiveness that we saw in college? We don't know. Is he going to be able to handle a full workload? What happens if he can't? Are they going to be able to do things there? You mentioned with them bringing in Christian Kirk, they brought in Evan Ingram at tight end. There's just a lot of new pieces on this team. They didn't do as much as I would have liked to see them do to beef up the offensive line and protect their rookie quarterback. The defense still has a lot of question marks over there. So, I mean, again, you're asking them to double their win total. Do I think they're going to be the worst team in the league again like they were last year? No, probably not. But, I mean, if you're expecting this to be like a 7, 8, 9 win team that's knocking on the door of the playoffs, I still think they're a little bit of ways away from getting up to that point too. So Jacksonville Jaguars, I would rather play the over if I was betting anything. But like I said, I like the Texans over more. I mean, the under on the Jaguars if I was betting anything. I like the Texans over more. So that's the way I'm going to go about it. Now, let's get to the important part of the show. Let's call up the next one here. We'll start with last year's AFC South champion and AFC #1 overall seed, Tennessee Titans. So here's an interesting thing for the Titans. The Titans had 12 wins last year. So they're projected for 9.2 here by Jeff Radcliffe. That's almost 3 wins below what they had last year. But remember what we were said in the open, too. This was a team that did not have a massive point differential. It's not like they were winning a lot of games and blowing teams off the field. They were on the right side of a lot of those coin flip type games where one play here or there could have changed things. And that's how they got to that 12-5 record. But that was an overperformance. Now, a lot of credit goes to them. A lot of credit goes to the coaching. They did a lot of that late in the season without Derrick Henry, which I don't think a lot of people thought they were going to be able to do. But they definitely did overperform last year. Now, how much did they overperform? That's the question here. Because like I said, we're still projecting them for 9.2 wins. And 9.2 wins is actually a little bit higher than what is out there in the market. 9 wins on DraftKings is basically the number. And it's actually juiced down a little bit to minus 105 to the over. So, probably like 8.8 wins is more like the number that DraftKings has here. So we're a little bit ahead of that. I don't like playing the number when it's a solid number 9 there because I don't want to get, the push on that. I either want to win or I want to lose my money. I don't want to be pushing if I have to wait, 17, 18 weeks of an NFL season before I see any profit on that. So I'm going to be avoiding that one together. You could play the over at BetMGM. Over 8.5 wins is juiced up to minus 145. You can play an over on FanDuel, over 9.5 wins at plus 115. So if you think that they can get 10 wins, make the playoffs, win the division this year, that's probably the way to go. Over on FanDuel at plus 115 would be the way to play the Titans. But here's the number that I'm going to ask you about here, Quan. That plus 170 to win the division here. We said it's basically a 2-horse race. And again, I agree, and I think you agree with what you said in the opening, that Indianapolis probably deserves to be the favorite here. But do you think it's that big of a difference that plus 170 should be the number? If this was more like in that plus 130, plus 140 range, I would say, all right, I get that. Plus 170, that's a pretty big number there. That's almost, that's over 60% is, that's like a 40% chance to win is what they're saying there.
I think the key factor is Derrick Henry's health. We saw in that playoff game just how much, if you shut him down, there's not really much the Titans can do. We got that surprise season out of Ryan Tannehill the year before. And in the playoff game, it just looked like they couldn't get anything going. So will Derrick Henry come back in the flow of the offense? Will he be able to carry the load? Is this going to be a 2,000-yard season, or is that foot injury going to come back to hurt him? And I think that's probably why there's such a wide gap between the Colts and the Titans. And once again, for me, it's about quarterback play, and I like Matt Ryan way more than Ryan Tannehill. So I think that's where the gap lies with those two teams.
Yeah, I would agree with the Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill take. I'm not going to argue that. Although I do think that Ryan Tannehill is somebody who is a little more underrated than people give him credit for. I think he's a little bit better. And I think he's better because he fits the system that they have very well.
Doesn't try to do too much, yeah.
Exactly. And it goes back to what you said, too, with Derrick Henry. Most teams, especially in the way the league is now, most teams are quarterback-driven. This is not a quarterback-driven team. It's a running back-driven team. And when Derrick Henry is on, that actually makes things easier for Ryan Tannehill as well, because this is a team that uses play action very well. And that's really where they get their big plays from. Because after Derrick Henry goes and bashes in the linebackers for, 2 or 3 quarters there, now they start cheating up the safeties. The linebackers start cheating up to the line a little more to see if they can shoot a gap. And then the next thing you know, it's a fake handoff, and they got somebody one-on-one on the outside. Now, again, those are new players that they're going to be having one-on-one on the outside. It's no longer Julio Jones and A.J. Brown going down for them.
Yeah.
It's now going to be Treylon Burke and, Robert Woods. So we got to see how that all fits into the offense as well. Even at tight end, you got, Austin Hooper coming in there for them now. So there's a lot of new pieces that they have on this team here that we're going to have to see how it all fits together. But the big thing, like you said, is going to be Derrick Henry's health. But here's the thing. I think a lot of people are overshooting this Derrick Henry health concern, because if you look at Derrick Henry through the first 5 or 6 years of his career, the guy only missed 2 games. So if you only miss 2 games in 5 or 6 years, what is that? 80, 90 games that they played in those 2 years, and he only missed 2 of them. Yes, he got hurt last year, but really it's not like, he's getting like the injury prone tag thrown around on him. This is not really an injury prone guy. He had an injury last year. Football's a violent game. Guys get injured all the time. So, every once in a while is fine. It's when guys have these consistent injuries that I get a little worried about. And I don't really think that's the case here. So plus 170, I think, is a decent number. But let's throw that graphic up one more time here. All right, so let's get to the last team we have here in the AFC South, and that's going to be the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are the favorite to win the division this year after finishing 9-8 and coming in second last year. Indianapolis projected by Jeff Ratcliffe for 10.3 wins this season. Indianapolis's number, the consensus number out there for the even number for them is right at 10 wins. DraftKings has it minus 105 to the over, minus 115 to the under. So DraftKings actually projects it slightly below 10 wins, and they had to juice it down a little bit to kind of get there for us. Let's see. At 10.5 wins, MGM has it at plus 115 to the over. And I think that's the way that I'm going to play it this year. I really like this Indianapolis Colts team. I thought their weakness last year was at the quarterback position. And I don't think people realize how good Matt Ryan was. Matt Ryan had a pretty good season last year on an absolutely garbage offense with an absolutely garbage offensive line in front of him and absolutely garbage wide receivers that he was throwing to, with the exception of his running back and his tight end, who were basically the only two weapons that he had. I think Matt Ryan added to this team with Jonathan Taylor, that big-time offensive line, the solid defense that they have. This is a team that I think can make a lot of noise here in the AFC. Minus 115 to win the division right there. So you're looking at like a 53% chance they're getting to win the division. Plus 1,300, 13-1 to win the AFC, about a 7-8% chance there. And then plus 2,500 to win the Super Bowl, about a 4% chance to win it there. Quan, you heard all the numbers here. Which is the number you like the most if you're going to play the Indianapolis Colts?
Just for the value alone, I would go Colts Super Bowl. 25-1. I know I came on AFC East and talking up the Bills, but if we're thinking about it, 2 years ago when Phillip Rivers was the quarterback of the Colts, this team was in a shootout and they had multiple chances to win that game versus the Bills in the wild card round of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan Taylor last year came on strong, 18 rushing touchdowns, league leader in rushing touchdowns. He can carry the load. And like you said, this team last year, the weakness was the quarterback position. And you're talking about going from Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has been a consistent and elite level quarterback throughout his entire career. And I think
former MVP Matt Ryan,
former MVP, was a couple of BS plays away from winning the Super Bowl and probably having the Super Bowl MVP. So I think if we can get just a smidge of what Matt Ryan was, like he was playing on a horrible team last year and still competed and still had the Falcons in games, winning games they shouldn't have. I think that this is going to be one of those sleeper teams that with Jonathan Taylor carrying the load, and if he's not, they're not going to be able to put 8 in the box. And, this is what you could do if you have a running back that you need to stop. You put 8 in the box and you make Carson Wentz beat you. You can't do that anymore against the Colts. And that defense it's great. It's a great defense, and I think them being in the AFC South and having the schedule that they'll have, we're going to see Indianapolis come along towards the middle of the season, and I think this is going to be one of the teams we're talking about heavily during the playoffs.
And something else that's interesting here, too, to think about, the two teams that you really look at in the AFC as the ones that are going to be the big competition for this team, right, are going to be Buffalo and Kansas City. Yeah. And when you look at Buffalo and Kansas City, the blueprint to beat both of those teams has already been laid out by the teams that have beaten them over a couple of years. You want to control the clock. You want to run the ball down their throat. You want to keep those stud quarterbacks over on the sideline. There is no team that is built better to control the clock with their offensive line and run the ball right down your throat than the Indianapolis Colts are. You know what? Even Buffalo, if you have to go play Buffalo up in Buffalo that everyone's so worried about in the cold weather, there is no team that I think is better prepared to go up and play Buffalo in a playoff game up in Buffalo than the Indianapolis Colts, who are basically going to take that big stud offensive line that they have, and they're going to take their big stud running back, and they're just going to run right behind it over there, and they're going to win the game 17-10 or 17-13 and go on to the Super Bowl. So, again, do I think this is how it's going to happen? No, I actually think Buffalo's going to roll them, and Buffalo's going to win it all. But with that being said, there is a path that you could see where you understand how Indianapolis makes it there. And again, if you have a really good offensive line and a really good running back and you can control the clock here, And now you also have the play action and the threat of pass. So like you said, if teams start creeping up and putting that eighth man in the box, Matt Ryan's the kind of quarterback that can make you pay. Carson Wentz really wasn't last year, and that's what teams dared them to do, to throw the ball. So I do think it's going to, they have those young wide receivers, Alex Pierce on the one side, Michael Pittman on the other. Those guys are going to have to take a step forward. But if those guys take a step forward, I think this Indianapolis team could be very dangerous. So I think we had it on the graphic at 13-1. I actually saw it this morning at 14-1 on BetMGM. So it actually went up a little bit there to win the AFC. So that's the way that I like to play it. I like the Indianapolis Colts at 14-1 over on BetMGM to win the AFC. And that is the way that I'm looking at it for our AFC South preview here. We're going to take another quick commercial break, and then we're going to be right back to talk about some very interesting, very fun player prop bets for the AFC South that I'm going to be looking to take here on Betting with Benny. Welcome back to the AFC South Sports Betting Picks video here at FTNBets.com, Betting with Benny. We talked about all the teams, Quan. You know what time it is now. It's time for us to do my favorite part of the show and talk a couple player prop bets. So throw up the first one here. Let's get into it. Derrick Henry over 1,349 rushing yards, minus 115 on BetMGM. So here's the deal, right? Last year, he only played in 8 games. I had him as a futures bet to win the AFC, or actually to win the entire NFL rushing title last year, which obviously didn't work out. Although when he went down after 8 games, he was the guy that was leading it. He averaged 117 yards per game through those first 8 games of last season. The year before that, he had over 2,000 yards in the 16 games that they played, so he averaged over 120 yards. The year before that, he played 15 games, had 1,500 yards, averaged over 100 yards a game there. So for him to get 1,349 yards, we really only need Derrick Henry to play 13 or 14 games this year at the same level of production that he's done for the last 3 years here. And that's what I really like about this. We talk about how 2/3 of these bets usually come to the downside and end up to the under. Injuries being a big reason why that. But the guys that you do take for the over, you want guys that you think can blow by their numbers. If Derrick Henry plays all 17 games and he does exactly what he's done for the last 3 years of him being in the NFL, we're not asking him to do anything different or anything he hasn't done before. At a minimum, that should be 1,700 yards. So we got a 300, 400 yard cushion on this number here, Quan, at minus 115. I just think the 1,350 yards was just too low of a number for Derrick Henry. What do you think?
I think it's easy. I think if you're counting on him to be healthy, you're looking at him for, potential NFL MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. You're thinking he's going to play all 17 games, 16 games, 15 games. If he's playing double-digit games, that's easy money. You're going to get a couple 200-yard games out of him against some of the competition they play in the AFC South. I think you take that to the bank.
Yep, I like that one a lot. Throw the next one up here because this one is very similar. And another one that I like, we're getting the same 1,350 yards out of Jonathan Taylor. And we know what the Indianapolis Colts are going to do. Maybe they throw the ball a little bit more this year because they have Matt Ryan. But again, we also expect them to win a lot more games this year, which means that they're going to be ahead in more of these games, which means they're going to be grinding out the clock, which means it's going to be more Jonathan Taylor time at the end of the game. So here's another guy last year. 1,800 yards that he had. He averaged over 110 yards per game. So again, at 1,350 yards, if he plays 12 or 13 games, there's a good chance that he's going to be at this number here. If he plays all 17, it's going to be great. So again, we have a projection for him that's going to be, maybe 200 or 300 yards over this number. We have a little bit of a built-in cushion there in case he does miss a game here or there. I like the over on this one. 1,350 yards for Jonathan Taylor, although we're not getting as good a deal on this one as we did on Derrick Henry. Minus 142 is the best number we can get on this Jonathan Taylor one. Quan, throw up that last graphic as well when we have it. So let's do all three, and then I'll, let you tell me which one of these you like the best. So here's the last one we got. Our man, Brandon Cooks, wide receiver from the Houston Texans. Brandon Cooks is one of the most underrated fantasy assets in all of NFL football right now. The last 6 full seasons that this guy played, he's had over 1,000 yards in each of those 6 seasons. He had one season, I think it was 2019, that he was hurt, and obviously didn't get 1,000 yards that year. He might have only played a game or two if he played at all. And then the last time he didn't get 1,000 yards was in his rookie season. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter. Everyone says, oh, he's in a bad offense. This is the kind of guy that you could drop into any offense and he's going to get 1,000 yards. And you know why I say that? Because the first 2 times he had 1,000 yards was when he was with the New Orleans Saints. The next year, he got traded to the New England Patriots, and guess what? Had 1,000 yards again in that season. And then he ended up on the Los Angeles Rams, and guess what? Had 1,000 yards again in that season. Sat out a season in between, I think, and then came over to the Texans and has had 1,000 yards each of the last 2 seasons. So 949 yards is what they're asking here. This guy is an absolute machine for 1,000 yards or more anytime he stays healthy. He's been over at 1,100 yards in a lot of those seasons as well. So even if he misses a game or two here and there, I think if you get 15 games out of Brandon Cooks this year, you're going to wind up with a 7th 1,000-yard season out of Brandon Cooks and a cash on this over at -115. So I gave you 3 that I like a lot. These are 3 of my favorite bets for the entire season on the futures. They all just happen to be in the same conference here because all 3 of these teams are going to lean very heavily on these guys. Of these 3, Quan, which one? You know what? I'm not even going to ask you which one you like best because they're all good. Rank them for me. If you had to rank them, how do you rank these 3?
I would go Cooks because
okay.
I mean, I think like you said, he's undervalued and underrated. 6 of the last 8 seasons. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to hit easy. And I think Derrick Henry, the only question I have is his foot injury. But if you're looking at the Jonathan Taylor prop for over on rushing yards, like you said, if he's projected to play as good as they are, I think you look at him for Offensive Player of the Year too. He should have been in the MVP race last season. And I think this year is going to be pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I think all 3 of these guys are going to go over. I like all 3 of these props quite a bit here. And I love the 2 running backs because I think both of them are at least 150 yards under where they should be. If not even more, you could probably make a case for. So again, all of you guys who are looking to get more of this information, remember, use promo code Benny. You can go over to FTN Bets, FTN Daily, or FTN Fantasy. Use that promo code and save 20% off. If you're looking for your season-long fantasy drafts, get over to FTNFantasy.com. If you're looking to get some money down on DraftKings and FanDuel and Prize Picks and all those other sites this year, that's what you use FTN Daily for. And if you're going to be rocking with Quan and I all season long as we drop all the bets for you, the prop bets, the side bets, we're going to make you guys some money. We're going to have a little bit of fun in the process, or a lot of fun in the process as well, like we usually do. And you know what? If that's the case, get over to FTNBets.com. Remember, promo code Benny saves you 20% off. Don't come to me and be like, oh, I forgot the promo code. I'm trying to save you guys money so you have more money to gamble with. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. Quan, anything you want to add before we sign off?
Hey, let's keep it rolling in the AFC South. Take all 3 prop bets and go Colts.
There you go. He's not the best color man in the business for nothing, folks. and for that, for my man Quan, this is Benny signing off for this episode of Betting with Benny here at FTN Bets.